sometimes in real estate, people can't really come to an agreement. So they'll make concessions to each other. A compromise. Or are they compromising? It's the Real Estate Show. Welcome to the Real Estate Show. My name is Rick Naples. I am the owner-broker of Zone Realty LLC. You zone your home. A real estate company here in Connecticut. When you're dealing with real estate, whether you're purchasing a home or you're renting someplace, or maybe it's a commercial facility, there's always negotiation going on. I mean, first you have to find the place. Then once you've found what you want, you have to make an offer and get that offer accepted and then go through the process of completing the deal. But before you even get there, before you even start, you kind of think in your mind what it is that you want and what it is that you need. Now, usually we all make a list. We decide if we're purchasing a home, for instance, we need bigger, we need smaller, we'd like this, we'd like that. Perhaps we want a garage, perhaps we can do without a garage, perhaps we need a 2-car garage, not a 1-car garage. We'd like to have that garage attached to the house, rather than being separate from the house. Maybe we need more than 1 bathroom. Maybe we need 2, maybe 3. Maybe we're a growing situation where we need more than 2 bedrooms. We need 3 or 4 or 5. Maybe we'd like some land around us. Perhaps maybe the location is really important, where the home is located, or where, if you're purchasing commercial property, that commercial property is in central to where you do business. There are a lot of different things that you have to think about when you're kind of going to start this whole real estate adventure. Now, let's say you find someplace and you have your list of what your wants are and what your needs are. And it's not exactly what you're looking for, but it could be made to fit. So now you're going to be making a compromise. You're going to be making an adjustment to what it is that you actually want. So in other words, perhaps this works for me because it doesn't have a garage, but maybe it has a carport. Or if it doesn't have a garage or a carport, maybe it has a driveway that's big enough to accommodate your vehicles. Maybe you have to look at off-site storage, but you're getting such a good buy on what you're purchasing that extra few dollars a month to put something in storage wouldn't be too bad to do, depending on how often you use that item, obviously. So there is the opportunity to kind of look at what your want and need list is and make some adjustments. Now, when you're dealing with the other side, in other words, the seller, sometimes you're going to run into a situation where there's a give and take between the two of you. This usually centers around things like repairs or maybe features, or it could even center around what's being left with the property. I've had situations where people get into a big negotiation on the washer and dryer. So there can be this give or take going on, or this way of compromising or coming up with a compromise between the individuals, an agreement. kind of meet in the middle. But usually either one of those is going to require one side or the other gives up something. Now, compromising and doing a compromise can be slightly different. And I always like to demonstrate that by telling a couple of stories. I pulled off the internet some definitions just so we could kind of see what the slight difference is between a compromise and a compromise. A compromise, according to Webster's dictionary, is an agreement or a settlement of a dispute that is reached by each side by making concessions. Whereas compromising is a situation where someone from one side accepts something slightly different than what was originally offered. So they're one and the same, but they're slightly different depending on the situation. Now, as I said, I was going to share a couple of stories. Let's talk about making a compromise. We have a situation where we sell a house and it has a rather large lawn. The owner of the property will take a little less as far as the offer is concerned, but he plans to take his ride-on lawnmower with him when he moves to his next property. The buyer offers a little bit more than what the seller was asking for, but conditions it on him having the ride-on tractor stay with the property. Now, the seller doesn't want to leave the ride-on tractor, but the buyer wants the ride-on tractor. So you kind of have a discussion going on about something that really has nothing to do with the house. It has to do with the lawn. The compromise that they decide to make is the seller is going to take his lawnmower. However, if the buyer pays the higher price, he's going to give them a credit at the closing to allow them to have the monies to buy a ride-on tractor themselves. He gets to keep his ride-on tractor, they get to buy a ride-on tractor, they both agree. They've made a compromise. Now let's talk about compromising. Where's compromising come into play here? Well, sometimes when you're in a negotiation, one side or the other doesn't get exactly what they want. That could be something as simple as the price of the home, could be some of the amenities that come with the home, appliances and so on and so forth. Could be simple things like curtains and ceiling fans and things along those lines. Sometimes when you're looking for a home, you can't get everything that you want. You find yourself compromising because you're not able to get those things that you felt you needed in order for the property to work for you. But it's close enough. As I was mentioning earlier when I was talking about garages, perhaps instead of a 2-car attached garage, you'd settle for a 2-car detached garage. Or perhaps a 1-car garage could work as long as the yard had a shed or had the possibilities of you buying a shed for your extra storage. So you're constantly looking at what can I do, what can I give up, what will work, what won't work, things along those lines. It's an interesting way because you have to navigate yourself through all these different things in order to make it feel like a good deal for you. Now, of course, the real estate transaction chugs along. Regardless of all this different negotiation going on or all these different thoughts that you have, the real estate transaction basically stays the same. There's a process that needs to be followed in order for the real estate transaction to go through and to help. Now, sometimes you're going to find yourself making a compromise or compromising on something right up to the day of the closing. And I'll talk about that in a minute. I told a story once on the real estate show about a multifamily purchase. This was a situation where a couple was purchasing a multifamily unit. It happened to be 4 units in this building. And one of the tenants had not paid their rent in 6 months. The seller of the property was not going to evict the tenant. They felt, I'm selling the property, let the buyer worry about it. The buyer didn't want to go forth and purchase the property with a problem tenant in it, where they're not going to be collecting any rent. And they had figured out their finances, and they needed that 4th unit rent in order to make the numbers work for this multifamily. So we had a situation where the buyer wasn't satisfied with purchasing the property because of the tenant that was in there that wasn't paying rent and is going to need to be evicted, and a seller who just wants to sell the property to get away from the whole mess, but wants to convey the property over to the buyer with a rent missing. The buyer needs the rent in order for the numbers to work. The seller doesn't want to get involved with evicting the tenant. Now, regardless of the tenant's situation and that whole ball of wax to get into, there's a problem here because the buyer doesn't want to move forward with the closing on the property, and the seller can't move forward because the buyer has some reservations. So a compromise was decided on. A compromise was decided on. Basically, the attorney escrowed a few months of rent to make up the 6 months that were missing and an additional year's worth of rent out of the proceeds of the sale of the house. In other words, they held back the money from the seller in the proceeds of the house to make sure that the buyer would be solvent in going through with that particular closing. The buyer was satisfied because now they have the money where their numbers work. The seller was satisfied because now they're selling the property. And the buyer felt that there's enough money where I'm getting the money that I needed in order for my numbers to work, and I'm also getting a year's worth of protection of rent being paid while I go through the eviction process of getting this particular tenant out of that particular space so that I can rent it at a current rent. Now, there's a lot of other things that come into play. You know, what if the tenant damages the property? What if they can't get him out of the property? What happens here? What happens there? And that was all discussed behind the scenes. But that's a perfect example on how something wasn't going to happen, but because the two sides talked and an agreement could be made, a compromise was put forth and the deal was closed on. There's all kinds of compromising that you do in your life. There's all kinds of compromises that you make in your life. The idea is to keep moving forward, to be able to try and make things come together, and sometimes there's a lot of give and take. Now, I'm not talking about you giving up everything that you wanted or needed. You're not really, just settling for something. Although some of us have been in that situation where out of desperation we've had to settle. There's always a way to try and figure out how to make things work. And that could be in the purchase of real estate. That can be even as simple as fixing something that's broken. Perhaps you can't get the part, so you come up with some other way of fixing it. You make a compromise. You compromise on getting it fixed to make it work. Sometimes it takes a little bit of thinking out of the box. Sometimes there's a lot of stress that's involved. I want to talk about that in a moment. At this particular time, and I'm filming this show in 2024, we're still in a situation where the inventories, the number of houses that are for sale, are low. We have a lot of buyers out there that feel a sense of urgency. They want to buy a property because they're not sure what the interest rates for mortgages are going to do, and they feel they should get into the market now. We have a lot of sellers that are hesitant to put their homes on the market, but when they do put their home on the market, they're looking to get top dollar for it. And they do, because there's so little inventory out there. People are paying asking price on homes, sometimes even paying a little bit more than the asking price in order to win that bid or to get that deal. Because the market is so tough, people really have to, on the buyer side, sit back and decide what it is they want to do. What are they looking for in the purchase of a home? Sometimes you have to look at it from the angle of making compromise or compromising on something. You have to look at it as, I can't get this because it's just not available now, but I need to purchase something because I've got to move or whatever the situation is, so I can work with that. But what is the this and what is the that? This is where your realtor comes into play. When you sit down as a seller or a buyer with your realtor, they're your counselor. They're the one that you could talk to about what your wants and what your needs are and what can possibly happen and what the trade-offs are going to be. You can discuss different ideas of, well, maybe I could do this, maybe I could do that. Because in a market where everybody's competing for the same few properties, sometimes you have to look at it in such a way where I can make this work for me. But are you willing to make those sacrifices and pay more to do it? That's something that you have to consider, and that's something that you have to really discuss. The realtor's going to help guide you. The realtor's going to give you information to help you make good decisions. Financially, you'll have your mortgage officer. Purchasing the home, you'll have your realtor, as well as a team of other individuals that do get involved in the real estate transactions, such as your attorney, the paralegal that puts the paperwork together, the mortgage officer, the underwriter of the mortgage, the appraiser, and of course, the home inspector. All these different people will get involved to help the transaction move through. And as you're going through the transaction, you may find that you have to tweak it a little bit here, that you have to change it a little bit there, that you might have to make some compromises. Help, the market's crazy. Realtors are happy to share information with you, but only when you hire them to sell or help you buy a home. You have questions, but you're not ready to sell or buy a home right now. What do? Search the internet? Talk with a friend or relative? Stay confused? There is an answer. Private consultation, hourly rates, safe, private, no obligation to hire. Rick Naples, real estate consultant, broker realtor, 860-385-2218. I want to just share with you something that is on the wall of my office, and it kind of concisely says everything that I'm talking about here when it comes to either making a compromise or compromising on something, coming to an agreement. But it also gives a little bit of a philosophical twist to it, and I just want to take a moment to read it to you. I don't know who actually said this, maybe somebody can look it up and see, but it says, wake up every morning smiling, seize every moment. Try to be bold with new things. Amaze yourself. Take chances. Be optimistic. Embrace change. Be legendary. Live your life with abandon. Have an open mind. Be fearless. This is your time to throw caution to the wind. You only live once. I think that says a lot. My name is Rick Naples, and this has been the Real Estate Show. I thank you very much for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. The Real Estate Show, Zone Realty LLC, a Connecticut real estate brokerage, owned and operated by Rick Naples, Realtor. When you decide to buy or sell a home in any market, you need to work with a company and an individual who has the expertise and knowledge to guide you through the ups and downs of a real estate transaction. Zone Realty LLC has been and will be your local agency. Our agents and our broker bring a wealth of knowledge to the decision-making process. Buying or selling a home is not an easy process. There's a lot involved. Navigating through it all, you need to work with someone who understands, who listens, who can help you get answers to your questions. Rick is a realtor, past president of a local realtor association, leader of new realtor orientations, a respected authority, and recognized with a commitment to excellence by the National Association of Realtors. You have the opportunity to work with a realtor and an agency you can confide in, trust, and have confidence they'll get the job done. Zone Realty LLC, licensed in Connecticut. Rick Naples, broker. Email info@zonerealtyllc.com. Website www.zonerealtyllc.com. Phone 860-385-2218.
The water's warm at Jaws Pond, and we're stocked full of treasures. Big or small, we buy it all. We buy and sell fast rides, power tools, vintage guitars, and so much more. Walk the plank in style with our fine jewelry, diamonds, and watches. Plus, we have a huge selection of the latest video games, including the new PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. Jaws Pond, conveniently located on Meriden Waterbury Turnpike in Southington and West Main Street in New Britain.
I'm your host, Kurt Barwis. Today, I have a very special guest, Dr. Andrew Lynn.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Veterans Corner. My name is Chuck Wooden.
Decision for ourselves for this week, if we want to be made well.
Hi, welcome to the crack of dawn. It's Dawn Lombardi. I'm starting the painting. It's going to be the cliffs with some water. Love it.
He took me on the sets of Lost in Space, Batman.
Everybody has a story. What's yours? Until next time,